The Italian Wine Podcast is the community-driven platform for Italian wine geeks around the world. Support the show by donating at ItalianWinePodcast.com. Donate €5 or more and we'll send you a copy of our latest book, My Italian Grape Geek Journal, absolutely free. To get your free copy of My Italian Grape Geek Journal, click Support Us at ItalianWinePodcast.com or wherever you get your pods. Grazie mille.
Welcome to Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Listen in as we journey to some of Italy's most beautiful places in the company of those who know them best, the families who grow grapes and make fabulous wines. Through their stories, we will learn not just about their wines, but also about their ways of life, the local and regional foods and specialities that pair naturally with their wines, and the most beautiful places to visit. We have a wonderful journey of discovery ahead of us, and I hope you will join me. Welcome to Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Today we travel to the heart of the Chianti Classico, to Greve in Chianti, to meet my guest, John Mattai, owner of Castello Vicchiomaggio. John, it's been more than 35 years since we last met, and it's great to be in contact again. How are you today, and is it a beautiful day in Greve?
Yes, I'm fine, thank you. And the weather is gorgeous. It's let's say standard issue for this time of year, which means clear blue skies, 20 degrees centigrade, nice and sunny.
Well, that sounds beautiful. That sounds pretty perfect. Now, John, for our listeners who are located all around the world, I'd like you to describe Castello Vicchiomaggio to give listeners a vivid view of a very special place, a place with a very long history.
Yes, certainly. We're a hilltop castle. The whole estate of Castello Vicchiomaggio occupies a hill. The valleys are very wide, so from the top of the hill here, we're at 300 meters above sea level. So the actual castle is 300 meters above sea level, and the lowest part of the hill is around 170, 180 meters. So it's a hill that you can see from a distance, and we've got a commanding view to the south towards Greve in Chianti, and the north towards the hills that are the backdrop for the city of Florence, the Apennines. We can see the Apennines quite clearly. So there's, the Tuscan countryside with cypress trees and olive trees, which are very nice because they're evergreen. So it's even in the winter, there's always some greenery around.
And it's a real castle, John, isn't it? It's in this commanding position strategically. It's a castle with a very long history.
Yes, certainly. As it stands today, it was rebuilt between 1540 and 1560. So that's Renaissance architecture. And there's an older part, the tower, which is medieval. So that comes from, we have documents that describe the tower dated 956. And prior to that, going back much, much further, it was an Etruscan fortress because all the hilltops were strategically fortified.
Okay, well, that's a really, really good description. Now, John, I'd like you to share your own story or the Matta family story of how your family came to be at Castello Vicchiomaggio.
Yes, certainly. Well, we got involved in wine because my father, who was Italian, Matta, obviously it's Italian and Spanish, actually, Matta. He was born near Asti in Piemonte, and he emigrated to the UK and set up a wine import business. We're talking of 1921 when the wine import business was set up. And over the years, it expanded, and in the early 1950s, It was the biggest Italian wine importer in the UK, launching especially, just to name one product, Campari, across the UK. And this estate was purchased in 1964. And I went to school in the UK. Then I lived and worked for a year in Burgundy at Nuits-St-Georges with the Dufouleur Freres wine producers. Then there was 3 years of agricultural college at Alba in Piemonte. So that's specializing in winemaking and viticulture.
Well, that's an incredible story, John, really, about how your family was instrumental in the very early days in bringing Italian wines to the UK.
Yes, certainly. It's the UK market. I know now it's seems incredible that there was a time when there were no Italian wines, but in the 20s, 30s, and even 50s, Italian wine was very, very unavailable, let's say.
Yes, certainly. It seems, John, that from an early age you always knew that you wanted to build on your father's work at Castello Vicchiomaggio. Is that right? And so you went to Burgundy and then to Alba to study winemaking, to learn your craft.
Yes, certainly. I mean, it was the only subject that was spoken about at home. So it was always wine, and there was always wine being tasted and everything. So as far as I was concerned as a child, I thought, that the world was just one big vineyard and everyone was involved in wine.
How wonderful. Now, John, I guess if your family bought Castello Vicchiomaggio in 1964, did you say?
Yes, 1964.
This would have been a time of immense transition in Tuscany with the demise or the winding down of the Mezzadria, a real change beginning to transform the region itself.
Yes, certainly, certainly. In those days, there were already, let's say, not non-local families beginning to get involved in wine, and others, Tuscan families, improving, because the vineyards of Italy in the late 50s were still recuperating from negligence that took place during the Second World War, because in that period of time there was, no fertilizers, no diesel for the tractors, there was nothing. So vineyards especially were neglected for a number of years.
Of course. Now, John, I think we met in the fall of 1989 when Kim and I were researching, writing, and photographing the wine roads of Italy. We were both considerably younger, and the world was quite different. I mean, there were no mobile phones. I had to use a payphone in Gettoni to make appointments. There was no internet, no email, no social media, no podcasts, no euro. The Chianti Classico itself was in a state of transition. I remember the Chianti 2000 project was one that everybody was talking about. The wine itself was evolving, and the Chianti Classico as a wine zone was evolving. And you've been a long part of that story from the earliest days of this transition to now. So I'd just like to think about some of these changes that have happened in the years. I see how your wines have evolved, how hospitality has evolved, which is a subject I'd like to get back to. But let's just consider some of those changes.
Yes, certainly. Well, the major one that you've touched on was the project, the Chianti Classico 2000, Chianti Classico 2000 project, which was initiated around, it must have been 1985 approximately, And it entailed our consorzio, the Consorzio Chianti Classico, together with the universities of Firenze, Siena, and Pisa, if I remember correctly, all working in the vineyards to select and classify specific types of Sangiovese, because up till then, if you walked in a vineyard, you would have seen some Sangiovese with bigger berries, with smaller berries, with tight bunches, loose bunches. So it was the consortio's objective, stimulated obviously by all us producers, to do a major agronomical research and classify all these various types of Sangiovese grapes. And this took 15 years. I mean, it's a very slow process because it's simply observation in the vineyard, then replanting the varieties that seem better than others. But the end result, which came out in the year at the beginning of the year 2000, just before, was that there were 10 classified types of Sangiovese, which when one was replanting vineyards, one could choose. So mostly smaller berry, not so tight bunches, and the advantage of that is obviously if it rains on a bunch that doesn't have tight berries on it, it will dry out very easily. Whereas if it's a tight bunch and a tight cluster, and all the berries touch each other, the water can penetrate into the bunch, and then that creates mildew or mold inside. So that's highly undesirable. So the big push in Chianti Classico style and quality is really thanks to this huge project that now allows us to choose exactly the type of Sangiovese that we want. And I think one needs to add that this is something that in France they'd been doing for centuries, or certainly for a century. If you go in a vineyard in France, you'll see in the classic vineyards, all the vines are identical because they've been doing this agronomical research longer and earlier than when we started in Italy. But now Italy is on a same level, let's say. So any plantings, not just Sangiovese, it's been done for other great varieties.
Yes, I can remember what a big project that was. John, I also recall in our book we have a photo of you standing next to an ancient vine that was trained up a tree,
Yes.
as had been done for centuries. Are those old vines still standing?
Well, we've just got a couple as let's say as a memento, because when we met, this Chianti Classico 2000 project had not really started. So the Chianti Classico, this project changed everybody's view, and lots of people, once the project was completed, replanted a lot of vineyards, as we did. We replanted a lot of vineyards starting 1998 onwards, and the results have been really excellent. So the Chianti Classico 2000 project changed our outlook on the vineyard and prompted everyone, not everyone, but a lot of vineyards in Chianti Classico to choose and change the Sangiovese that they were planting.
Okay, and so this has been one factor that is seen over this period, the rise of Chianti Classico in world markets in terms of prestige and value as well. And that's interesting to note as well. You mentioned the Consorzio, which is celebrating 100 years this year. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes. It kicked off last week here in Florence with a big conference and presentation. There's a nice logo and so on. And it is the oldest wine consortium, producers consortium in Italy. So that's gratifying and gives us a lot of history. And now we are doing events, celebratory tastings around the world to emphasize this fact.
Okay. Now, John, let's just talk about your approach and philosophy to viticulture at Castello Vicchiomaggio.
Yes, certainly. Well, we start with the principle that the wine is made in the vineyard. It may sound obvious, but it's all our efforts and work are carried out in the vineyard. We look after the vineyard quite meticulously, and that's to ensure that we can get the highest quality of grapes up to the winery during the harvest. So if you start off with really high quality, ripe to perfection, if the grapes are in perfect condition, then there's no reason why you shouldn't make an equally high quality wine. So this is, let's say, principle number one and overrides everything else. Then the cellar obviously is important, but there's no alchemy in the cellar. You know, we've got nice oak barrels from the best cooperages and a good bottling machine. We do certainly a year's bottle maturation for our top cru, Gran Selezione, our so-called super tusk. All the work is in the vineyard.
Okay. Well, John, let's take this moment then to just give an overview of your main flagship Chianti Classico wines, starting with San Jacopo.
And certainly, we've over the years we've created our vineyard cru. So we've selected specific plots for specific styles. So every one of our Chianti Classico cru are, let's say, single vineyard. The word single vineyard's often misused because Castello Vicchiomaggio itself is a single vineyard. But within that, we have small plots for specific wines. So our San Jacopo comes from a plot where yields are slightly higher. So we have a slightly different pruning technique. So from that area, we can produce a wine that has fruitiness, freshness, and easy to drink. So San Jacopo is always released the new vintage 1 year after the previous harvest. So now in October, November of 24, we'll be releasing vintage 23. And that is matured exclusively in large oak barrels. So to retain the freshness and fruitiness. Large oak means 5,000 liters.
Italian Wine Podcast. If you think you love wine as much as we do, then give us a like and a follow anywhere you get your pods.
And then we have our Reserva Petri. We give each wine a specific name, Petri, because the Petri family were owners of Castello Vicchiomaggio between 1850 and 1910. So Reserva Petri, again from its own vineyard, slightly different pruning to reduce the yields. Chianti Classico, you can produce the yield, the maximum per hectare is 5,200 litres, 52 hectolitres, which is very low. But for Reserva, we're around 44, 45, so 10% approximately less than for San Jacopo. And the wine has longer skin contact during fermentation, and then matures in large and smaller oak barrels. There's also a component of Cabernet in that. There's about 10% Cabernet, and the Cabernet is matured in the classic French barrique. I'd like to underline that our Sangiovese does not go into barrique. We only use oak barrels, small, large, but no 225 litre size for the Sangiovese. We then have Gran Selezione, which is the relatively new category of Chianti Classico, so 3 categories now. And there the yields go down even more. To get to Gran Selezione level, we're on about 38 to 42 hectolitres per hectare, which is really very, very low. And we have 2 Gran Selezione. We have La Prima, which you mentioned earlier, which is Sangiovese with a small percentage of Merlot. And then we have the newest one, Le Bolle, which is 100% just Sangiovese. And that's an extreme wine, we say on the back level, an extreme wine, uncompromising, from the stoniest vineyard at Castello Vicchiomaggio.
Is Le Bolle then the actual vineyard within the vineyard?
Yes.
A section within, yeah.
Le Bolle is also a geographical location. It's a hamlet on the road which borders with Castello Vicchiomaggio. There's the road sign that says Le Bolle. So hypothetically, our neighbours, if they planted a vineyard on their land and it bordered with Le Bolle, would be able to use that name. It's a geographical location. So it's not, as such, it's not a registered trademark. We'd be delighted if other people did plant there.
John, that's a great overview of the Chianti Classico wines produced at Castello Vicchiomaggio. I know you produce other wines as well, but I'd like to turn now to wine hospitality, because I know this is an important element of your activities. I know too that 35 years ago you were already pioneers in wine hospitality with accommodation, a restaurant, a cooking school. And this is, when we were researching and writing the Wine Roads of Italy, wine hospitality in Chianti Classico, but really across Italy, was still just beginning to be developed, certainly compared to France. It's another world now for wine lovers, for wine tourists. There are so many wonderful opportunities now that simply didn't exist. You were pioneers, and I know your family are very involved in this and have helped develop it. So tell us about what you're offering now in wine hospitality at Castello Vicchiomaggio.
Yes, certainly. Well, we have accommodation. So we've now got 16 very nice guest rooms. Half of them are in the main castle building, and another half are in the what we call canonica, which is the presbytery attached to the church that we have here. And they're both very historical buildings. And there are 8 in the Castello. They're apartments, they're big. They're all bedroom plus sitting room and small kitchen unit. In the Canonica, they're normal, let's say, hotel size rooms without kitchens. And then from next year, we'll have a cluster, a little hamlet, if you like, of 4 houses, which will be available for weekly rentals. The rooms are available on a daily basis, and the houses will be available on a weekly basis. There are four very nice converted Tuscan farmhouses. Plus, those 4 houses will have their own swimming pool. For the rooms here in the Castello, There's also a beautiful swimming pool with that infinity effect, so you can swim and gaze out over the valley towards the village of Greve. And then we have a restaurant which is independent of the rooms. It's in the Castello, and that is now open every day for lunch, with service in the garden, obviously, in the spring and summer and warm autumn days. And it's open 5 nights a week, 5 out of 7. So we also obviously have space, a big ballroom for weddings and birthday parties or whatever. In fact, we have quite a number of weddings where people take the rooms, all the rooms, and the restaurant for a couple of days. And then cooking classes we tend to do in the autumn or early winter, so at the end of the season. So let's say from a hospitality point of view, we've got quite a lot to offer. Plus, every day there are cellar and vineyard tours and a wine lunch with wine pairings. So that takes place every day.
Gosh, that's a lot going on. And your family is now involved in this. Is that right, John, your children?
Yes, because when you were last here, they were all, I think there were only 2. Now, in the end, we have 5 children, 3 daughters and a son. And the youngest is 32 now. So, and they're all involved in the business with my wife. So it's myself, my son, and 1 daughter. We're concentrating on the wine side. And then it's the 2 other daughters and my wife concentrate on the restaurant and hospitality side. So we've divided things up.
It must be wonderful and gratifying for you to have your family working with you.
Yes, certainly. You know, they're all here, and they. One advantage is they don't charge overtime if they do a few extra hours.
I'm sure.
The disadvantage is they don't always obey me blindly like they should.
Right. Yes, I'm sure there are advantages and disadvantages as always. John, let's talk about the restaurant briefly. I want to talk about the traditional cuisine of Tuscany and perhaps pairing with your wines. Maybe just mention some of the really classic dishes that every visitor really needs to sample when they come to the Chianti Classico.
Certainly. Well, I've got our menu open in front of me just so to prompt me a little bit. We change our menu 4 times a year, so we do it seasonal. And we've got 3 young, enthusiastic chefs that are always trying to make the food, the presentation attractive, and an experiment with presenting Tuscan cooking in a slightly different way. So one of them, I'm looking, this is the spring menu. We've got the starters, primi, the pasta courses, and the main courses. So a typical starter that it isn't often associated with Tuscany, but is la battuta. Battuta is a beef tartare, and this is as a starter, so it's a small one. Beef tartare with vanilla flavored cream cheese and artichokes.
What wine would you pair with that, John?
Well, that I'd certainly go for San Jacopo. That's nice, fresh, fruity wine, which, you know, with raw beef goes down nicely. And we also do a white now because we have a small vineyard on the coast in Maremma now. So we have from there a Vermentino. So in the summer, you know, a nice crisp Vermentino would go well with that. Our Vermentino has the same name. It's called San Jacopo as well. So we have San Jacopo Chianti Classico and San Jacopo Vermentino. So that there's let's say, a pair.
Okay.
Then I've turned the page and we have, this is really a classic, homemade, I'm reading from the menu, homemade egg pappardelle with wild boar sauce. So you can't get much more classical than that. And there again, you could have your San Jacopo or a nice glass of Reserva. Certainly, Reserva would tie in very nicely there.
I'm imagining that those wild boar probably came from quite near where you are.
Yes. There's obviously a lot of boar in the woodlands of Tuscany. So if anyone's a hunter, there's quite a bit to hunt. And then on the menu, this is a typical Tuscan dish, but with a more modern approach. It's a tortello, so that's a big sort of raviolo, and that's stuffed with guinea fowl and rabbit. Guinea fowl is la faraona is common in Tuscany. So that's an interesting starter.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
Yes, I'm beginning to feel hungry. Let's say that's more San Jacopo and Vermentino rather than Reserva.
Okay.
And then the main dishes, because we always have a vegan vegetarian option. So one of them is the top of the menu here: grilled morellino artichoke, red lentil puree, Pienza pecorino cheese fondue. So that's a vegetarian option, and then without the pecorino cheese, it becomes a vegan option. So that can be either for vegans or vegetarians.
That sounds wonderful, John, but artichokes can be tricky with wine. What would you pair with that?
They can be slightly tannic. Here the artichokes, they're cut very thinly and grilled. So I've obviously tried all the dishes on the menu, and they don't leave a harsh tannic taste in the mouth. So again, Reserva Petri would be great with that. For the meat eaters, we have again in the spring menu. Then it'll change, but this again is a classic braised beef cheek, and that's been braised in our Chianti Classico. So here you can stick to Reserva, or obviously move up to Gran Selezione, or even our so-called Super Tuscan Sangiovese Cabernet blend, which is Ripa delle More. And then we have, the usual bistecca alla Fiorentina, the Florentine T-bone steaks, which are suitable for 2 or 3 people. It's the real Florentine T-bone. So they all weigh a minimum of a kilo and 200 grams. So that's not a single portion, obviously. Guests have that and then divide it up in certainly 2, but 3 people quite easily.
It's an extensive menu, John. It's quite an undertaking, the restaurant in itself.
Yes, there's 5 of everything. 5 starters, 5 pasta dishes, and 5 main courses. As I said, we change it 4 times a year. And then there's the dessert menu. All our desserts are strictly homemade.
Do you make a vin santo, John?
We have a vino. It's not vin santo. It's a dessert wine, but it's younger than a vin santo. So it's sweet, but it's fresher and fruitier. So it can't be called vin santo, but it is a Tuscan dessert.
Is it a passito?
Yes. Although on the label it's vino liquoroso because it's a fortified wine.
Okay.
So it's a vino liquoroso.
Okay. Well, John, you've taken us on a really good tour this morning of Castello Vicchiomaggio, of your family history, of the evolution of wine and hospitality in the Chianti Classico, and really, I think, given us a picture of what a special place this quite splendid castle on a hilltop is. So I hope our listeners who are all around the world will come to Chianti Classico and will make their way to Greve in Chianti and up to the Castello Vicchiomaggio. I'm longing to return myself. It's been too long. It's been a great pleasure catching up with you again. I've really enjoyed meeting you here this morning.
Well, thank you, Mark. No, it's been great to make contact, and hopefully we'll be able to talk. Let's not wait another 35 years.
That might be a bit too long.
Maybe a bit too long.
Well, great, John. Thank you again for being my guest today, and I hope you have a good growing season and a good season of visitors to Castello Vicchiomaggio this year. And all the best to you and your family.
Thank you very much, and please tell your listeners if they're your listeners and they booked a room or they're just coming for a visit, to mention it at check-in or wherever, and I'd be delighted to say a personal hello.
Well, that's great to hear. So I hope people will certainly be doing that. I'm sure they will. So thank you, John, and a presto, spero.
Thank you, Mark. All the very best to you and family.
All the best. Ciao.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Arrivederci. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe right here or wherever you get your pods. Likewise, you can visit us at ItalianWinePodcast.com. Until next time, chin chin.